This is 5 Live on September the 11th. It's 5:47. Security in American skies has been overhauled since last year with a new body in charge. It's called the Transport Security Administration, and it's introducing new measures at all 429 US airports. But some critics say they're just creating an illusion of security. Our reporter Stephen Chittenden is here. Tell us about the Transport Security Administration.
I
think there's a problem there, obviously, that echo should not be happening. We'll try and come back to Stephen in just a second. Julian.
Yes, it's 5:47 now, and you only have to be here in Kabul a few minutes to realise that this has been, and to a lesser extent still is, a very dangerous place. Well, this looks like a typical Kabul street. Lots of people walking around, traffic going by. You can hear taxis, motorbikes. There are bicycles as well. It would look typical were it not for this shell of a building in front of me. 3 years ago, just to illustrate how dangerous it was to live in this city, the Northern Alliance launched a missile which hit the building in front of me. It was a cinema. That was destroyed. So were buildings around it. And 110 people died that day. Well, 3 years on, and just 2 miles down the road, the terrorists struck again, of course, only last week. I'm now standing right on the site where a taxi was parked that exploded, killing dozens of people right in the centre of Kabul. There was another car parked alongside it, which was overturned in that blast. Now, just across the road from where I'm standing, we have the Ministry of Information's offices and the very tall Ministry of Telecommunications, which has aroused speculation that bomb attack might well have been aimed at government targets. But you only have to look around me here to see how busy this is. There are market stalls, there are shops, there are flats directly above those shops. Some of the windows of those have been blown out, to see how devastating that explosion was bound to be and how many civilians were going to be very badly hurt in it. And alongside me here, somebody who was very close to that car bomb when it went off, Mohammed Ajmal. Just how close were you?
Well, I was about 120 yards far from that car bomb when it exploded. There were two bombs, in fact. The first one, that was a bag in the back of a bike. When that exploded, the people gathered around that. And the second and the most devastating one blowed then, killing more than 43 people and injuring. There were so many injured that I couldn't even count that. In the meantime, the cars were taking them to different hospital of the Kabul city.
Very frightening.
Yeah, very frightening. People were frightened.
Well, Mohammed is here because he is working alongside a man by the name of Alan Gear, who is a British journalist, but he is here training Afghans because he wants them to follow in his professional footsteps. That's the idea, Alan, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. One of the problems here is that there really isn't any history of journalism in this country, and also the Taliban outlawed journalism, a bit like Robert Maxwell, so it's very difficult for people here to get much of a sense of what's going on.
Do you get a sense that there is a way to achieving some sort of free press here with the journalistic expertise required to provide that?
Yes, one of the problems that we've got at the moment is there are no fewer than 140 newspapers in Kabul. Anybody is saying, hey, let's do a newspaper, but there's no business plan, there's no real thought for what's going on. So with the Institute for War and Peace Reporting I work for, we work hard to try and develop an energetic, robust and responsible press rather than people just producing newspapers from their kitchen table.
Yeah, I mean, you were showing us a few examples when we met a couple of days ago of the sort of things that people used to read and the sort of things that you're trying to provide them with.
Yes, what we've got, we have 50 correspondents on our books now, and the best of the stories that they write go on our website from London. So are read around the world. It's really the only place where people can read Afghan stories by Afghan journalists. And we are able to get inside. For instance, we had a story about the opium farmers here. Opium farming is obviously big business. The UN have come in and said, hey, guys, don't grow opium, grow wheat. And, of course, we go and talk to the farmers who say, oh, no thanks, guys. You know, we quite like the $2,000 an acre that we get at the moment.
Yeah, we're going to raise that issue a little bit later on in the programme. Mohammed, what's your role in working alongside Alan?
Well, I mostly translate the stories as well as assist him in with the reporters. When they come with an idea, Alan tell them what do they do, what they should do. Then they refer to me, and I tell them, I guide them to go and interview this guy and this guy. And when they come back with their stories, I translate them, give it to Alan, he edit it, and then send it to London.
Right. Well, he looks pleased with the work you're doing at the moment. Also with us around the table in our guest house is Mazia Adil, who's from the BBC World Service Pashtun Service. Good morning, Mazia.
Good morning for you too.
I'm conscious of how important the World Service is to people here. Are you conscious of that as well?
I think yes.
Especially during the Taliban, when people weren't supposed to listen to it.
Yes. During the Taliban regime, all the people, I think, listened to the radio, especially in the Pashtun service, Pashtun Farsi unit.
And now, do you see a big change in Kabul? We're looking at this city a year after September the 11th. Do you see many differences?
Yes.
Where specifically?
No, people are very happy. People can work, especially women can educate, can work. But people wait to reconstruction of the city that never, till yet, doesn't...
And are you optimistic for the future?
Yes.
You are. Good. A final word to you, Alan. When you come here and live here and see it and see the destruction around you, can you see a way forward from all this?
Yeah, I'm astonished at how energetic and enthusiastic and entrepreneurial the people are. I probably came like a lot of people expecting it to be a rather downbeat pace. It's not. It's fantastic. In my walk to work this morning, people trying to sell me just about everything, from a box of matches to a cup of tea. And I take my hat off to them. I think they're wonderful people, and I really hope they're going to do well in the future.
From Basildon, Essex to the capital of Afghanistan, eh?
I'm a very humble man. Thank you.
Good on you. Thank you very much to Alan, to Mohammed,
Thank you.
and to Mazia, Victoria.
Let's try again to talk about security in America's skies. Stephen Chittenden, tell us about the Transport Security Administration. This is the new body that's in charge of security.
Yeah, Victoria, they've had to hire tens of thousands of people to work as screeners, and they're meant to be in place at all the US airports by November the 9th. Previously, this job was the responsibility of airlines who use private security firms. Similarly, by December the 31st, all checked-in baggage must be screened for explosives. Now, there's a great deal of skepticism in the industry over whether this agency can meet the target. But today, the boss of the TSA, Admiral James Loy, was given a good grilling by a Senate committee, and Admiral Loy gave this reassurance.
It should be noted that TSA has met every deadline in the Aviation Transportation Security Act up to this date. The next important one is the November 19 deadline for passenger checkpoint screening. It will also be met. The December 31 deadline for baggage screening will be met in 90+% of those 429 commercial airports.
So what are the critics saying?
Well, they feel that despite Admiral Loy's reassurances today, these measures, they just concentrate on too small an area. They want to look at arming the pilots, bag matching like in Europe, or looking at what they call the back door, the staff entrance to airports. And all these measures are being discussed, but they weren't made mandatory, counter to the recommendations of a government advisory body. And one of its members is Patricia Friend. She's head of the Flight Attendants Association, and she accuses the airlines of luring passengers back by creating what she calls an illusion of security.
If anyone thinks that the kind of people who planned and carried out the events of last September 11th will take a look at the visible signs and say, well, I guess they've closed that door, so I guess we might as well go home, they're sadly mistaken.
So is it possible to say it's safer now?
Yes, I think it is possible, and the answer is yes. The culture of flying here has changed from one of being hop on, hop off. That's all gone, really. Now only ticket holders can get to airport gates. Cockpit doors remain locked and strengthened, and there are armed air marshals on board. And Admiral Loy gave some figures of how these federal screeners are working. Since September the 11th, they have collected 600,000 knives from passengers and 28,000 box cutters, what we might call a Stanley knife, the sort of weapons that were used by the terrorists on September the 11th. But really the problem is that the US has only really got to the same level of security as we already have in Europe. And the worry now is that as we move away from September the 11th, the moves towards greater security here in the US may lose some momentum.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Roger Normand is still here, co-founder of the Centre for Economics and Social Rights. With the heightened levels of security, is there a civil liberties issue here?
Well, there's an enormous civil liberties issue here in the United States. Some of it has to do with the heightened security, but I think much more it has to do with this general atmosphere of fear that many people feel, I'm among them, is kind of being used by the government as a pretext for a political agenda that really doesn't have that much to do with fighting terrorism.
But if it makes people feel more secure, if it makes people feel safer, isn't it worth it?
Well, I mean, I, for one, would rather have security than the illusion of security, as we heard that person talk about on your show earlier. I mean, I think something that a lot of New Yorkers ask very seriously because of what happened here is, how do we achieve safety and security? Why did this happen? How can we ensure that it doesn't happen again? And for that, I think right after September 11th, a year ago, for a few weeks, there was a real kind of public questioning. Why did this happen? What can we do in terms of our deeper policies to make sure it doesn't happen again? And that's gone now. And now it's airport security instead of, foreign policy in the Middle East, which I think any rational person is going to look at U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and conclude that's why a lot of this is happening. And the way things are going, it's probably only going to get worse and worse. I'm someone, I was just 2 months in Pakistan. My wife is from there, and I just recently got back, and it's become, in my subsequent, it's a place that Americans can't walk around anymore. Many parts of the world are becoming that way, and I think that U.S. policy has a lot of responsibility for that, and the response we're doing right now is, to me, the wrong response.
It might be something that people here in the Manhattan Diner are debating because the noise level seems to be increasing here. Thanks for your emails that we're already getting this morning, bbc.co.uk/5live. This is from John Hunt in Bournemouth. I worked in the World Trade Center in 93 and 94, so I'm familiar with the area. I took my wife to visit New York in February 2001. I'm stunned by the scale of the devastation. I've never really been able to really take it in since my wife phoned me at work to say that she'd heard reports of the disaster on the radio. Very quick weather, John Cassidy.
Some rain at the moment, Victoria fringing Northern Ireland and the west of Scotland, mainly the Hebrides. Otherwise, mist and fog clearing away to give a nice, sunny and warm day.
This is 5 Live.
Live news. Live sport. This is 5 Live.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on September the 11th. This is Victoria, Derbyshire in New York, where it's 1 in the morning. Right now, across the city, bagpipers are starting a slow march to the site of the World Trade Center, where later this morning, a ceremony described as reflective and dignified will be held in memory of those who died.
And this is Julian Warwicker in the Afghan capital, Kabul, where it's 9:30 in the morning. Afghans are heading home in their thousands, full of hope. But what's here for them when they arrive?
First the news, here's Alan Rock.
Good morning. The United States is on high alert this morning with 15 embassies closed across the world and anti-aircraft missiles deployed in Washington. As Justin Webb reports from New York, there's tension as well as sadness ahead of today's commemorations.
In hundreds of ceremonies and religious services across America, people will look back on the day a year ago, which by common consent here was the worst single day in the nation's history. They will do so in an atmosphere of great sadness, but also one of great tension. Intelligence reports gathered in the last day or so are said to suggest a real risk of attack. Anti-aircraft missiles have been deployed around Washington, and the vice president has been taken to a secret, secure location. President Bush has not changed his schedule, which will take him to each of the 3 sites where the 4 hijacked aircraft crashed.
British victims were remembered last night at a special church service in Manhattan. The Foreign Secretary, Jack Straw, read out a message from the Queen praising the spirit and resilience of New Yorkers. The rector of St. Thomas's Church, the Reverend Andrew Mead, paid tribute to the British people who died in the World Trade Center.
The people killed on 9/11, among them the 67 British nationals, were innocently going about their work. They were killed for being ordinary, free people.
Here, there'll be a special service outside the American Embassy in London. And at St. Paul's Cathedral, Prince Charles and Prince Harry will join relatives of some of the Britons who died. Peter Hunt reports.
It will be a day of painful, poignant memories for the bereaved and one rich in symbols. A year ago, thousands of people visited Grosvenor Square in London, opposite the American Embassy, to leave messages and flowers. This morning, that support will be acknowledged during a short ceremony in the square. A New York police officer will give the Home Secretary, David Blunkett, a tattered Union Jack, which was recovered from the rubble of the World Trade Center. Those who died will be remembered at St. Paul's with the release of more than 3,000 white rose petals from the cathedral's dome. One of those conducting the service has described it as an opportunity to think about the victims and a time to light a candle of hope for the future.
The events of a year ago are also being marked by a continuous 24-hour performance of Mozart's Requiem. More than 15,000 people in 25 countries are taking part in what's being called the Rolling Requiem. In Britain, it'll be sung by a choir at a Methodist chapel in West Yorkshire. Here's John Thorne.
The idea for this continuous choral commemoration was conceived by members of the Symphony Chorale in Seattle after performing Mozart's masterpiece earlier this year. Using the internet, invitations were sent out to choirs in every time zone around the globe to create 24 hours of continuous singing, a rolling requiem. The thousands taking part say they hope this unified singing exercise will contribute to the healing process for all those affected by the World Trade Center attack.
A journalist from Pakistan who says he was the last man to see Osama bin Laden before he went into hiding has told 5 Live that he's sure the Al-Qaeda leader is still in Afghanistan. Hamid Mir says he was asked by Al-Qaeda members to meet bin Laden in the city of Zabul on the border with Afghanistan and Iran, although the meeting never took place. Mr. Mir said bin Laden was dangerous and still capable of organizing terrorist attacks such as the car bombing in Kabul this month, which killed at least 15 people.
These days he is like a wounded snake. He is damaged, but he is not destroyed. And in these kind of circumstances, he is more dangerous. I cannot say that he is in a position to organize the attacks like September 11 last year, but still he can organize attacks like the 5th of September attack in Kabul this year.
Tony Blair is deciding whether or not to recall Parliament. The opposition leader, Ian Duncan Smith, is the latest figure to call for a debate on Iraq. Here's Norman Smith.
Downing Street is anxious to play down suggestions that a recall of Parliament is imminent. However, the Labour Party chairman, Charles Clarke, has said the matter is being kept constantly under review, and a senior ministerial source has told the BBC that the matter is being seriously and actively considered. The decision by the Conservative leader Ian Duncan Smith to add his voice to those pressing for a recall can only add to the pressure on the government to give way. However, it's understood the Prime Minister is keen not to recall Parliament until the long-awaited dossier on Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction is ready for publication.
An influential group of MPs has accused the government of having little idea about the extent of benefit fraud. The Commons Public Accounts Committee says the systems just aren't in place to estimate how much of the £100 billion in the Social Security budget is lost to fraud or paid out by mistake. Charles Kennedy will give a speech to the Trades Union Congress in Blackpool today. It's the first time a Liberal Democrat leader has addressed the TUC. Mr. Kennedy will discuss the role of the private sector in public services. That's the news on 5 Live. Here's the sport with Arlo White.
Arsenal have lifted themselves back to the top of the Premiership table after a 2-1 victory over Manchester City at Highbury. It was a tale of the French strikers. Sylvain Wiltord and Thierry Henry scored for the Gunners. In between, Nicolas Anelka equalised for City as he returned to North London. Arsene Wenger's side have a 1-point lead over rivals Spurs and are now unbeaten in 26 league matches. Middlesbrough are fourth after a convincing win over Sunderland in the season's first North East derby. Zilad Nemeth scored twice. A new signing Massimo Macaroni grabbed his third of the season 3-0 the final score. There are a number of upsets in the Worthington Cup first round, including Division 3 sides over those in Division 1. Cambridge United beat Reading 3-1. Bury eliminated Stoke 1-0, and Rushden and Diamond sent Millwall out on penalties. Other First Division sides to go out were Bradford, Grimsby and Norwich City. Watford went down 2-1 at home to Luton after the kick-off was delayed by crowd trouble. There was a major surprise in Scotland as well. Celtic lost a league match for the first time this season, 2-1 at Terry Butcher's Motherwell. And there was one match in the First Division of Cricket's Norwich Union League. The Yorkshire Phoenix beat the Warwickshire Bears by 8 wickets.
Thank you very much, Arlo. Good morning. This is 5 Live. It's 7 minutes past 6, and this is a 24-hour programme reflecting the events in America on September the 11th last year, what's happened globally since then. And during the programme, we'll hear more from Julian, who's in the Afghan capital. We'll hear from Jerusalem, Islamabad, Iowa and Washington, taking soundings really from across the world, because it is a day that changed the world. Here in Manhattan, many people are going to stay at home today. Some schools will close. Commuters that don't really want to get on packed trains and buses. Few will board aeroplanes. And frankly, a lot of people here want this day to pass very quickly. The city and the country are under unprecedented terrorist alerts. Anti-aircraft missiles have been deployed around key targets. Extra police patrols are out on the streets. And the vice president has been taken off to a secret location. Although I have to say, in New York, it feels like a normal city. The president and the mayor of New York are urging people to carry on with their lives as normal, and many will try to do that today. Steve Evans is our North America business correspondent. He was at a meeting at the World Trade Center when the first plane hit. A year on, how has New York changed?
Small but significant ways, I suppose. Very hard to define ways. If you talk to long-time New Yorkers, they'll say things like that people meet each other's eyes on the subway, on the underground now. It used to be you never looked anybody in the eye on the underground, on the subway, because you get this kind of who are you looking at type reaction. And long-time New Yorkers will say that now people do meet, their eyes do meet on the subway. A lot more warmth. It's certainly a lot quieter now. One of the things that you noticed immediately after September the 11th a year ago was that people didn't hit the horns on their cars as easily. The streets were much, much quieter. The bars were much quieter that evening. Now, I think it's coming back to normal a little bit, but I still think the city's subdued, and people are subdued. I think people are much more thoughtful. If you talk to absolutely anybody who's anywhere near this place where we are now, a year ago today, they will say that they are much quieter, that they think an awful lot about things like family a lot more. So people have changed, but it's in quiet, subtle ways.
And about today in particular, how are people viewing it? Do many want it to pass as quickly as possible?
Hard to generalize, but certainly the people I talk to, the nearer you got to that thing, the less most of them want to have to do with this thing today. An awful lot of people are going to stay away from work, for example. I'm talking to a chap who was on the 70th floor of the South Tower, which is the second tower to be hit, when the plane went into the North Tower, and he then came down just in time to avoid the second plane going into pretty well where he worked. You ask him what's he going to be doing today, he's going to be about 50 miles away with his family. He doesn't want anything to do with this ceremony. There's an awful lot of resentment, I think, at the, I don't know, I mean, intrusion, I suppose. If you go to this site here, there are usually, though they've been cleared away for today, there are the tackiest souvenir sellers. You know, I mean, if you want a souvenir showing you've been to Ground Zero and you've got the picture and all that kind of thing, you can buy it here for $5. You can't today, because the city authorities aren't that daft. So there's a lot of resentment against that kind of tourism thing. Some of the people who've come out from London have had people say, you shouldn't be here, just shouldn't be here. So I think this city wants to, okay, you have one anniversary, you mark it, you certainly remember it in a very public way, but that's it, you move on.
In terms of the economy of the city, has it been damaged? Have big companies, the headquarters of big companies, moved out of town? Has there been a drop in the number of visitors?
Certainly been damaged. An awful lot of companies, well, we can hear an aeroplane. The flights coming here aren't like they were. People are frightened. I mean, people say, let's keep flying, let's defy the terrorists, but the truth of the matter is they didn't keep flying. An awful lot of companies moved very quickly that day. across the water to New Jersey and operated from there because their offices had been destroyed. Some companies moved to London and operated that day from London, and they discovered that they could work from anywhere. You know, the businesses were much more mobile than they thought they were. The city authorities put figures on it, and they come up with figures like $73 billion is the hit on this city's economy. You can't really put a figure on it. There's no doubt, though, that the economy was hit.
And you yourself, how much do you want today to pass?
Oh, I mean, I wanted to pass a lot. I don't really want anything to do with it. I don't like coming to this place. I think that thing about, okay, you have one anniversary and then you move on. Mayor Giuliani, as was, said within about 3 weeks of the thing, time to start enjoying the good things in life, time to move on. Now, he said that 11 months ago, and I certainly think now the city and me want to move on and just get on with life, really. You know, it's a tourist attraction here. It's the tackiest kind of tourist attraction. People do come here and they remember, and you see the occasional person hugging the person they're with and crying and all that kind of thing. But you see an awful lot of people just taking pictures of each other.
That was Stephen Evans. Your emails continue to come in. Please do email us if you want to share your thoughts today. bbc.co.uk/5live. Helen Ledger sends this. She says she remembers watching the events live on television at work. I just could not believe it was happening. I've been watching some of the news clips from the time, and I still can't believe it's a year since this dreadful event took place. I now live for today and still fear what will happen next.
Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
Well, that was President Bush speaking to Congress last year before the attacks on Afghanistan begun. How successful has this war on terror actually been up till now? Well, 5 Live's Christian Fraser is back in London. In general terms, Christian, how successful have the alliance been in breaking up Al-Qaeda's operation?
Well, I think that really depends, Julian, on how you define success. If you're looking at the war in Afghanistan in isolation, then clearly there has been reasonable success. The Taliban are gone, the camps have been closed. But I think if you're looking at success in terms of whether they've closed Al-Qaeda down long term, then clearly there's a long, long way to go. I read a very interesting analogy in one of the broadsheet newspapers a few days ago, which described the war on terror very much like stamping on a nest of termites, only to see those within it run in different directions to set up their own colonies. And I think that very much defines now the new war on terror. You know, the US estimate there are hundreds, possibly thousands of Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters who fled Afghanistan. Certainly some of them are in the tribal areas in Pakistan, but a great number have spread further afield. And I think Al-Qaeda is now, perhaps more than ever, a global organization with a presence in as many as 50 different countries.
In which case it would be possible to make a case for saying that it's not been very successful at all.
Well, if you look closer at the figures, you have to ask yourself where everyone has gone. Certainly only 2 members of bin Laden's inner circle have been publicly accounted for. That's Mohammed Atef, who was the operations chief, killed by a drone missile that found his hideout in Kabul shortly after the war began. The other was Abu Zubaydah, who was the head of recruitment and training, who was caught in Pakistan. There are 598 people to be exact, still at the detention camp in Guantanamo Bay. But elsewhere, the figure's much more difficult to pin down. Certainly within Europe, in Spain, Italy, Britain, Germany, the number of people still being held are only in the tens. I mean, we're talking about people who've been held for minor offences like document fraud or possession of illegal weapons. So I think you can ascertain from those figures that many thousands are possibly out there. One of the experts on Al-Qaeda is Professor Paul Wilkinson. He's the director of the Centre for the Study of Terrorism and Political Violence at St Andrews University, and he told me he's convinced Al-Qaeda are regrouping and they're rebuilding.
The global network is still in existence, and we have seen a series of attacks and thwarted attacks by Al-Qaeda since 11 September, which I think is very clear evidence that the threat still exists. We still have a major task to do, and that major task is nothing less than the unraveling of this global network which has been established by bin Laden and his lieutenants.
And that global network is getting much wider. The spotlight has swung east to the Philippines, to Indonesia, and also now to the tri-border regions in South America of Paraguay, Argentina and Brazil.
So why can't the main players be found?
Well, I think if you want to get the strategy right against Al-Qaeda, there has to be agreement within all countries on how you're going to do it, the way you're going to go about it. Certainly, the intelligence battle has to be at the heart of any strategy. And there has been some success, certainly big steps within the intelligence community in how to deal with Al-Qaeda. But I don't think Washington has sufficiently understood yet the importance of winning not only the support of the Arab countries and the Muslim countries, but also the hearts and the minds of the people within these Muslim countries, because, of course, these are the people that are sheltering Al-Qaeda. And I think, quickly, just on that intelligence point, there has to be better collaboration on the counter-terrorism data that's collected, agreement on the way it's shared and the way it's analysed. And still, within recent months, we've seen intelligence agencies who jealously guard their intelligence and still withhold information from one another. And without that full cooperation, there must inevitably be gaps, and those gaps are, Al-Qaeda have shown they can exploit.
Christian, thank you very much. That was Christian Fraser. It's 17 minutes past 6, and Alan Robb has the headlines.
Live missiles have been deployed on air defense systems at the Pentagon and around Washington. A memorial service has been held in New York for British victims, and Tony Blair is considering a Tory request to recall Parliament to debate Iraq. Here's Anna with the latest travel.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning again. Just one motorway problem to tell you about. That's on the M5 in North Somerset. There's a lane out southbound following an accident between junctions 19 and 20, Portishead and Clevedon. Elsewhere on the roads, the A82 remains closed by landslide and flood damage at Abriacon, just south of Inverness. In East Sussex, a broken-down lorry is partly blocking the northbound A267 between Five Ashes and Mark Cross. And in Kent, the A258 Dover Road remains partly blocked by an accident between Deal and Dover. On the trains, Thames train services between Paddington and Reading are delayed after an incident in Slough. There's disruption to South Central trains on all routes via Haywards Heath because of extended engineering work. In Scotland, the line between Inverness and Aviemore has now reopened, but there's still no trains running on the Inverness to Nairn line, and First North Western trains are in the second day of a 48-hour strike. To report your delays, you need the hotline. That's 08700 100 500. Anna Rajan, 5 Live Travel.
Every day, we're digging deeper.
There is a share certificate in the name of Kenneth Bates, but he has no knowledge why.
Getting behind the story.
This guy is just an easy target for them.
And under the skin.
We're being followed by our very own secret policeman.
Investing the time.
Christian Fraser's been investigating this story.
Investigating the truth.
Have you used dexamphetamine and risperidone in 3-year-olds?
Journalism with a sharp edge.
See if he'll speak to us.
From the BBC, this is 5 Live.
19 minutes past 6, just to let you know where we are this morning. I'm in a Manhattan diner. It's called the Manhattan Diner. It's open 24/7, and it's surprisingly busy, actually, considering that it's, 20 past 1 in the morning here. I've just been chatting to a few of the people here. Some say they're here because they're sick of watching television and they feel overloaded with the media images of a year ago today. Some say they actually feel obligated to feel a certain way on this day, when perhaps they don't. And others say, look, it's a very special day. Obviously, it needs to be marked in a certain way. Julian, whereabouts are you?
I am in a guest house in Kabul. It's called the Everest Guest House. It's where we've been staying for the last few days. I'm in one of my colleagues' bedrooms overlooking a balcony and a small garden. I think it's arguably one of the quietest streets of Kabul, because if you turned either left or right out of here, within a couple of minutes you would hit the bustle and what I call the chaos with a smile that perhaps typifies this city. So that's Kabul at 10 to 10 in the morning on a very bright, hot, sunny day.
We're hoping to get the first editions of the New York papers in the next half hour or so. In the meantime, we'll have a look at the UK papers.
September the 11th, a time to remember and a time to look forward. That pretty much sums up the paper's mammoth coverage of today's anniversary of those attacks on New York and Washington.
All of them devote their front pages to the subject, and almost all of them have produced pull-out sections to analyse the significance of that day 1 year ago.
As part of its 16-page special, The Sun interviews some of the thousands of people widowed, orphaned or left bereft in other ways by those attacks. British-born Robin Larkey, who worked for the trading firm Cantor Fitzgerald, didn't stand a chance of escaping from his office on the 105th floor of the North Tower. Robin's wife and mother of their 3 children, Tracy, tells The Sun how she is trying to cope without him.
The Times has a 28-page tabloid section. One thing stands out, and that's the way a generation of American children lost their innocence 1 year ago. A simple drawing by a young child in red and black wax crayons of the aeroplanes crashing into the Twin Towers is a stark illustration of that.
Now, much coverage is given in the papers to the Prime Minister's speech at the TUC conference in Blackpool yesterday. Mr. Blair gave his clearest indication yet that for him, inaction is not an option where Iraq is concerned. I do not want it on my conscience that we knew the threat, saw it coming and did nothing, quotes the Telegraph, which, along with the other broadsheets, reckons the PM escaped relatively unscathed from the largely anti-war union activists.
And stern opposition, though, comes on the front page of the Mirror, which has long been critical of Mr. Blair's shoulder-to-shoulder stance alongside President Bush. Above a picture of the fire engulfing the collapsing Twin Towers is the headline, "How many more flames are we about to fan?"
Now, some figures for you from Kabul. More than 1.6 million Afghans have come back home since the fall of the Taliban last November. Now, many of them fled this country long before the Taliban actually came to power. They escaped when civil war broke out after the Soviets left in 1989, or even well before that. Now, most have been in exile in Pakistan. Others went to Iran or states north of here like Tajikistan or Uzbekistan. Now, the UNHCR are here to help. At one of their reception centres on the edge of Kabul, I met brother and sister Humaira and Akbar Sukinda, and first Abdul Mubinza.
Everybody wants to be in their native country. This is we came back with a hope for future to share in our rehabilitation of our country.
Tell me how long you've been away from Afghanistan for?
About 15 years.
Yeah. And you were in Pakistan
yeah.
in that time?
In Pakistan.
What was life like in Pakistan while you were away?
It was good. It was good because I was working. I had good salary. I was working there, and my children was studying Pakistani schools.
And what do you hope for now that you have come back?
I hope a good future, progress Afghanistan, progress society. This is our hope.
And this is your first day here?
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Very good, nice. Very good.
Tell me, Humaira, what does it feel like to be in Afghanistan today?
I like it. I see Afghanistan, and then my future is in Afghanistan, and I want to progress, and I feel so much.
How old were you when your family left Afghanistan?
15 years, 16 years old.
Yeah, you were 2 years old.
Yeah, 2 years
when
old.
your family left, so you've been away 15 years.
Yeah.
And what do you hope for now that you're back here?
I want to good future, and I want to some more things that like help of these people, Afghan people.
The message that those three came across with was extraordinary, really. They'd been away for 15 years, but it was all about coming back to the place they were born. It wasn't so much about the economy or other considerations. I had a look inside the bus. There were 3 women inside who were part of the 2 families therein. There was a cage full of budgerigars and mountains of furniture. It's quite humbling to speak to people who've not been able to live in their own country for so long. We were guided around what actually goes on in the arrival process by a guide from UNHCR.
We've got a verification team. This verification team is just verifying every family. Considering the right family, then they will start the process coming to the Mine Awareness Center. They will get briefed of short information about what mine is, how to avoid touching them. And passing the mine awareness center, they will come to the encashment center where they're receiving the $20 per person. And then they're coming to Médecins Sans Frontières. Children under the age of 5 are getting vaccinated against polio and measles.
And this section here is called Back to School. What sort of information are people getting here?
The information people are receiving here just advising them to go back to school. They're encouraging also the female teachers to go back to the school, and you'll be appointed as a teacher again without any, suffering difficulties.
And what's left of the process once they've been through this back-to-school tent?
The nearest tent where they're receiving the food and non-food items, and then they will start their short journey to the center town of Kabul.
So these people here in these colourful trucks that are parked up alongside us here, these people are about to drive off to, well, an entirely new life, really, aren't they?
They're very happy to have come back, to have returned back. And whenever you're going to have a chat with them, they're replying that it is our homeland. We have the right to live in our homeland. We feel more secure in our homeland, even if we don't have any house here, than in exile or foreign countries.
That was Nadia, who guided us round that UNHCR reception centre yesterday. I've got with me Masoud Wazik. I'm going to have a quick word with him. How old are you, Masoud?
I'm 12.
You're 12 years old. And when did you come back to Afghanistan?
I just came back 8 months ago.
And where had you been in that time?
I've been in Quartier Barwan, in Kabul.
In Kabul. And before then?
Before then, I was in Peshawar, in Pakistan.
With the rest of your family?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it like to come back to Afghanistan?
It's very good to come back to Afghanistan because it's our homeland, and I'm also happy because there's schools back, and also the children, the education is good now. Because in the Taliban's time, when we had education, we need to have a turban and also just like a uniform they made from turban, and also clothes of Islamic, and then after that. So now it's a very good situation in Afghanistan. It's our homeland, so I'm very happy to come back.
And you're back at school?
Yeah.
And you're enjoying school?
Yeah, I'm enjoying very much.
What are your favourite subjects at school?
Chemistry and physics.
I reckon you must have learned a bit of English along the way.
Yeah, I learned English in Pakistan.
Did you? And very well, by the sound of it. What would you like to be in a few years' time when you leave school and get some work somewhere?
I want to be a doctor.
You want to be a doctor? And how confident are you that you're going to achieve that?
I'm 80% confident.
Good. Well, good luck. It's fantastic to meet you. And
nice to meet you,
how's
too.
the rest of your family settling back in Kabul? Are they all happy to be here as well?
Yeah, they're all happy, especially my brothers, small brothers. They're very happy.
Fantastic. Masoud, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. We're getting some more emails from you and text messages as well. If you want to send a text, 07764 100 500. Nicola Bromham in Bagshot says, when I heard the news at first I didn't believe it. When I realised it was true, I cried. I think we should all hold the memories of September the 11th in our hearts and minds. It should be a reminder to be more compassionate towards each other, and a reminder that this should never happen again.
One more in just a sec, but Julian, Masoud, does he want a job on the radio? How eloquent was he for a 12-year-old?
Masoud's just going to sit down again. Victoria, have a word with Masoud.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm very well. You said you wanted to be a doctor. I was just suggesting to Julian that perhaps you could have our job on the radio because you're very eloquent.
I'll try to have a job in your radio.
You look quite comfortable with a microphone in your hand, I have to say.
He's getting the hang of things, is he? Masoud, it's lovely to talk to you. Another email here. This is from Elaine in Bedworth. I was so shocked about what happened a year ago. I just sat and watched the news. The pictures of people jumping from the towers and then running for their lives as they collapsed made me weep. It still makes me cry now. I hope that everybody will focus not just on remembering the dead, but also on making sure nothing like this ever happens again. It's 5 Live. Here's John Ketley with the weather.
Good morning. Yes, the temperature now in Kabul is 23 degrees. It's on its way up to 29. It's a gloriously sunny day in Kabul today, as it is indeed in New York, or it will be. Plenty of sunshine to come through there. And bizarrely, the same sort of temperature expected this afternoon, 29 degrees. We can't match that, of course. It's a rather chilly start in the UK. Temperatures down at 3 degrees in Arboyne up in Scotland, 5 degrees at Redhill in Surrey and Herne Airport, Bournemouth, and 6 degrees in Worcester and Edinburgh, 8 degrees for Bedford and Nottingham. So a chillier start than we've had recently. It is, though, much warmer out in the west where it's breezier, and there's some rain splashing up through Northern Ireland and the far west of Scotland as well. The temperature at the moment in Belfast is 15, some rain around here, and there's been 2 millimetres in the last hour at Isla. So for Western Scotland, mainly the Hebrides, the rain moving away northwards during the morning. Most places having a fine and sunny start anyway, the further east you are across Scotland. It'll brighten up in the west through the afternoon as well. Temperatures 17 to 21, west to east. For Northern Ireland, 19 degrees after this damp start. Some sunshine breaking through during the afternoon. The Isle of Man, England and Wales. Well, some mist and fog around first thing this morning from the Vale of York down through the Midlands into central southern England. That mist and fog shouldn't take too long to clear away, but just take care on your way into work. Plenty of sunshine to come, but it will tend to cloud over near the North Sea coast later in the afternoon. That cloud spreading inland tonight. 1-2 showers also just clipping Kent, a possibility there, but otherwise a fine day. Temperatures ranging from 19 degrees on the western coast to 22 in the heart of the Midlands today. Probably 19 degrees right on the east coast as well. That cloud moving further west tonight, bringing some drizzle, but a milder night than we saw last night. That's the weather. Now, Anna.
Thanks, John. There's still a southbound lane closure on the M5 in North Somerset. That follows an accident between junctions 19 and 20, Portishead and Clevedon. Calls to the hotline now report delays in Berkshire on the A34 northbound. A couple of miles before you hit the M4 at Cheveley, say 2 lorries are blocking the outside lane there. And in East Sussex, a broken down lorry is partly blocking the northbound A267 between Five Ashes and Mark Cross. I'll be back to update you in about 15 minutes.
Good morning, this is 5 Live on September the 11th.
Live news. Live sport. This is 5 Live.
And here are the latest headlines.